Imagine being so wealthy that you'll literally break an economy. Mansa Musa, the richest man in history, did exactly that. In today's episode of Mansa Musa, in 10 minutes, we'll explore how this man became so rich, broke an economy, and stayed ahead of inflation. Let's get into it. When you think of the richest people ever, names like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and even Warren Buffett I can. But compared to Mansa Musa, their wealth is peanuts. In fact, when adjusted for inflation, Mansa is the richest person in history with a peak net worth of $400 billion in today's money. And while modern billionaires took decades to accumulate their fortunes, Mansa grew his wealth in just 10 years. So who was this man and how did he become so rich? Meet Mansa Musa, the Lion of the Nile. Musa was born in 1280 in the West African Kingdom of Mali, a region with vast gold and salt mines. At the time, Mali was ruled by an empire known as the Mandinka. The Mandinka had grown rapidly in size and power after conquering neighboring regions. It brought them into conflict with the kingdom of Songhai, which they fought against for over 2 decades. By the time Musa was born, the war had reached a boiling point. The Mandinka were led by an ambitious king named Timbuktu II, who wanted to expand his kingdom even further. So he called upon his nephew Musa to lead the army and put an end to the Songhai threat once and for all. Though only 20 years old, Musa was no rookie soldier. He was raised for battle and received military training since he was a young boy. Musa assembled an elite military force consisting of 60,000 men, 21 tons of gold, and an arsenal of weapons and catapults. With this elite fighting force, Musa went head-to-head against the Songhai in a fierce battle. To this day, historians debate whether or not Musa actually single-handedly defeated the Sun. But what is not up for debate is that Musa won the battle and cemented himself as a hero of Mali. This victory launched him into the spotlight and set him down the path to becoming the richest man in history. Following his victory, Musa took on an even bigger task. His uncle asked him to embark on a pilgrimage over 4,000 miles to the Mecca in present-day Saudi Arabia. At the time, this journey was almost unheard of for someone from Mali. Most people didn't have the resources or courage to undertake such a treacherous trip. But Musa was up for the challenge and assembled a massive convoy that has become a thing of legend. Historians estimate that between 21 and 66,000 men, 21 tons of gold and 10 tons of silver made the journey with him, with each person or group donating at least 1 ounce of gold to the pilgrimage. Other sources also claim that Mansa took 30 elephants with him on the journey. While this figure is heavily debated, some historians do believe that at least a few elephants made the trip. Either way, it is safe to say that Musa's convoy was one of the largest in the history of the world. After arriving safely in Mecca, realizing what he had accomplished, Musa decided that he wanted to make the trip back home just as grand. On the return journey, Musa and his convoy encountered an Egyptian trading post and decided to stop for supplies. He generously lavished gold on the merchants and passers-by, essentially paying everyone to come with him back to Mali. Eventually, Musa amassed such a large convoy of people and goods on his way back to Mali that he was dubbed the Lion of the Nile for his lion-like march on Cairo. Some reports even say that the river itself turned to blood when Musa entered. However, this is likely a dramatic exaggeration. Upon returning home, Musa's legend had already begun to grow. People from around the world started coming to Mali specifically to meet the great warrior and spend his lavish gold. As the legend of Mansa spread, more and more people came to see him and Mali became one of the wealthiest places on earth. But then something strange. After spending so much gold on trade and gifts, there simply wasn't enough gold to go around. Suddenly, Mali's economy collapsed. Overnight, gold, which was plentiful before, became scarce. And because Mali's economy was built around gold, the entire country suffered. Gold, which used to be worth 1/16 of a silver dirham, now had to be weighed out in handfuls. To make matters worse, the influx of gold during Musa's reign caused the value of gold across all of Africa to decrease. For example, gold, which previously cost 75 cents per ounce, dropped to 5 cents per ounce. Now, if you don't know much about economics, this might not sound like a big deal, but if you've ever tried to buy anything recently, you know how expensive everything is. And that's what happened. Everything became extremely expensive. Wait, there's more. The the effect didn't stop there. In fact, it spread throughout the entire world. Even though Musa wasn't directly responsible for the European debt crisis, his actions certainly played a role. Before Musa flooded the market with gold, the price of gold was around 400% higher than it is today. Once Musa started giving away gold, the price. This made European investors extremely nervous because they couldn't rely on gold anymore. When the Europeans realized that they could no longer accurately value precious metals, they stopped trading altogether. And as a result, many businesses and banks went bankrupt. As you can imagine, the sudden collapse of the economy did not make Mansa very popular. People blamed him for ruining the economy and causing the price of gold to plummet. Because of the backlash, he started to hoard gold and even ban people from mining it. Unfortunately, he would soon regret his decision. Just 10 years after becoming the richest man in history, Mansa died of a mysterious illness. Because he hoarded so much gold, no one was able to use it for trade. In fact, Mali ended up having to pay a hefty fine to the neighboring kingdoms that they owed gold to. The once prosperous economy never recovered. But ironically, the value of gold eventually went up. Which means that if Mansa hadn't hoarded it, he would still be the richest man in history. Musa left behind a legacy that impacted the entire world. In fact, some historians even argue that his discovery of the Americas predated Christopher Columbus by nearly 50 years. Here's why. During his pilgrimage to Mecca, Musa's men encountered an African prince named Mansa. They talked about how far they had traveled, and Mansa told them about a faraway land across the Atlantic Ocean where the sun rises in the west. Intrigued, Musa asked if it was possible to sail there, but Mansa said it wasn't. He explained that there were no boats large enough to make the journey. However, after hearing about this land, Musa became obsessed with the idea of traveling there. Upon his return to Mali, he ordered shipbuilders to design and build large boats that could reach the land where the sun sets in the west. While these ships were never completed, some historians believe that Musa's obsession with this land proves that he knew about the Americas before Columbus. Now, here's a fun fact. Many people believe that the ancient Egyptians used gold to build the pyramids. But that wasn't the case. Instead, they used white limestone. The reason most people think they use gold is because of an old story from the 13th century. A medieval writer wrote that the Egyptians built the pyramids with bricks made of pure gold. But this isn't true. Archaeologists have found no evidence of this, and no gold pyramids have ever been discovered. Instead, the Egyptians probably built the pyramids from white limestone, which was quarried nearby, and then covered them in a layer of gold leaf. But unfortunately, centuries of erosion have worn away most of the gold. Before we wrap things up, let's take a quick minute to talk about inflation. Inflation is the rate at which prices increase over time. In other words, it's the decrease of purchasing power of money, which is generally reflected in the increase of prices of goods and services. One way to measure inflation is by using the Consumer Price Index, also known as the CPI. The CPI measures the average change over time in the prices paid by urban consumers for a basket of consumer goods and services. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average annual inflation rate from 1930 to 2022 was 1.5%. That means that in 2022, a product that cost $100 in 1913 would cost $101.50. The highest inflation rate occurred in 1920 when the CPI jumped by 19.7%. If you want to learn more about inflation, check out our video. What is inflation? How does it affect me? Alright, now it's time for your bonus fact. You may be wondering why Mali became so rich so quickly. And it all comes down to their control of the Trans-Saharan trade route. This was a network of trading routes that connected North Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa. The trade routes spanned over 4,000 miles and were primarily used to transport gold and salt. At its peak, the Trans-Sahara trade route was responsible for around half of Europe's gold supply. To put that in perspective, the United States produces roughly 600 tons of gold per year. Half of that is 300 tons. And that's just gold. The trade routes were also responsible for the majority of salt and ivory in the Mediterranean region. Not only did this bring in a ton of revenue for Mali, but it also helped spread Islam throughout the region. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.